So welcome, Karen, and thank you for spending some time with us to talk about bridging the opportunity divide, especially as it relates to disengaged youth and ensuring that they're college and career ready. So we know that the Forum for Youth Investment is really committed to promoting equity for all students and ensuring that they have the supports and the opportunities to make sure that they're successful in life. And this is especially critical when we think about college and career readiness. So let's go ahead and get the conversation started. So let's start off by talking about creating a pathway to improved outcomes as it relates to student success in life. So talk to us a little bit about how we get to these improved outcomes and what are some of the ingredients on this pathway.
Great, I'd love to. So I think we all know that we're working hard to create more opportunities for young people with the assumption that we're trying to get to improved outcomes, whether those are educational outcomes, employment outcomes, life outcomes. That's the path that we're on. The challenge that we have is that we've been on that journey for a long time. It's not a straight journey, and we're not doing well enough. So when we think about where we could be doing better, over the years we've come to decide that there are things we're doing well, but we really could improve. So on this journey, the first thing is we've talked a lot in this country about equality, and that really is sort of the grounds on which we're built. But recently we're talking, as you said, about equity. And that difference between moving between equality and equity is really important. So we'll talk more about that. We also talk about access in this country a lot, to make sure that young people have equal access to services, but that may not be all that young people need. And then we've got a big push towards completion, high school completion, post-secondary completion. So equality, access, and completion are the words that have been driving the work that we've been doing in this country. And the question is, are they enough? Not that we should stop doing them, but are they enough? So we need to come back and ask, is equality enough, or do we need to get to equity? So we'll come back and talk about that. That certainly is a theme in this country now, that just giving everybody the same thing doesn't necessarily get you to the outcomes that you want. On the access question, we know increasingly that just providing access to services is important, but if they're not quality services and quality opportunities, young people suffer, even if they're putting in the time. And then finally, while completion is important, we know across this country, unfortunately even here in DC, pushing young people to get a degree when you don't actually push them to have the skills that they need to go ahead after that degree is disastrous for them and disastrous for the systems. So at the Forum, we've really been saying we need to up our game. We need to now focus on equity, we need to focus on quality, we need to focus on readiness as that broader definition of, are they ready for the next thing, not just have they completed the piece that you're responsible for. And that's really where we're going in this work.
Very comprehensive. So we hear a lot about beating the odds and changing the odds. So can you tell us about the difference between the two and why this distinction is important?
Yeah. This hit me at about 30 years ago, I think. That shows you how old I am. When I was working with the Children's Defense Fund, and Marian Wright Edelman set up the Beating the Odds Awards. And they still do Beating the Odds Awards every year at their gala event. And they're celebrating young people who have overcome enormous adversity in their lives to be successful. And while we absolutely need to celebrate young people who have overcome odds, our job is not just to celebrate young people who have managed to cobble things together so that they can beat the odds. We really shouldn't be proud of ourselves until we have systemically changed the odds. And so that's why we've started talking about and making really clear we need to move from beating the odds, which is really about helping individual young people and doing what we can to piece things together, to actually changing the odds, which is a systemic approach to really looking at the things that are wrong and making sure that we're doing a better job at not just helping some young people, but really changing and laying that path for all young people.
Yeah, much more global perspective and taking a step back to look at those issues. So the young people that our site coordinators work with face numerous obstacles and barriers that often looks like the odds are stacked against them. In addition, they might not have access to the same type of opportunities that their more affluent counterparts may be privileged to have. So how does the lack of opportunity really factor into the topic of readiness?
Yeah, that's a good question. Well, one of the things that we have found useful in pushing this term changing the odds is if you say you're going to change the odds, you actually need to know what the odds are. And that's really a number. That's are your odds 29%, 57%? What odds do you have of moving towards success? And especially when we're talking about young people, where this is really about development and we're going through various developmental stages, we often have this narrative that in this country that if young people aren't on track by third grade, we don't need to invest in them.
Right.
The likelihood that they're going to recover from that is too great.
While it might seem simple, the concept of equity can be actually very complex. So can you clarify a little bit more about the difference between the two, and what should practitioners really keep in mind when we talk about leveling the playing field?
Absolutely. So we have looked at the idea of equity and so and equality. So one of the things that we know is if you're just looking for those numbers and you start to collect any data, the playing field is not equal. So for example, if you're looking at opportunities to learn, the After School Alliance looked at opportunities to learn after school. And found that by sixth grade, middle class kids had spent 4,000 plus more hours in quality learning environments out of school time than lower class young people.
Right.
That's the kind of equality gap that we're talking about if we're just counting do young people have everything. But if we move on from that to basically sort of go into a graphic to say, well, what do we have now? Well, that after-school example is a demonstration of the fact that what we have now is not equal. Some young people, and these pictures are very popular, so we played with them. So young people have a lot of boxes that they're standing on, and some have none. And so this image of that's sort of out there on the web everywhere of young people sort of looking over a fence is very popular, so we played with it. So if what we have now is the boxes are not evenly distributed. So some young people aren't looking. The question is, what happens next? Well, if equality is every young person gets a box,
Right.
that's fine. That's assuming that they're all the same size. Now they can all see over the same fence. The flaw in that argument, as you just said, is two things. One, the playing field is not level.
Right.
So let's literally adjust the picture and show that if young people are coming from families and neighborhoods that just have fewer resources, when they show up to your program or your service or your school, just giving them the same thing isn't going to get them so that they can see over the fence. We're going to have to adjust for the fact that the playing field isn't level. Over the last decade, we've also just come to really push on the idea that it's not just that family and neighborhood and community resources aren't equal. It's also that we've got systemic barriers baked into the systems that young people are coming to. And we have to be more explicit about those structural barriers that are there. Whether those are school discipline policies or obviously the school to prison pipeline,
Right.
the things that are disproportionately affecting young people, which are not about them, they're about how they are met and treated in the systems that we ask them to be in. So if you put both of those together, the fence isn't even and the ground isn't even, then getting to young people actually being able to see over the fence means that we're really going to have to adjust those boxes, and equal resources is not the idea. That's not the end game. We're going to have to end up with a really quite different distribution of resources to make sure we get to that goal of young people all being able to see over the fence.
Right.
The question is whether that picture of getting young people to see over the fence is enough. Is getting to equity the right goal? It's important, but we're still using an analogy that's about reducing barriers. And so when you introduce that opportunity question, are young people having all the opportunities they need? The question is reducing barriers enough? Isn't what we want to have young people actually in the game? So is it just that they're all able to look over the fence and see what the future could be, or are we actually preparing them to be in the game and be in the future? And if that's the case, then we as practitioners can't just say we're reducing the barriers. We actually also have to say we're improving the quality of what we're doing so that young people are actually ready.
So as mentioned, one of our key concepts today is readiness. So can you talk a little bit more about a definition for readiness and how it contributes to success, and more importantly, how social emotional learning plays into that?
Good question. Well, again, as you know, because we're now talking about readiness, readiness is more than a diploma. And so if we go all the way back to the National Research Council report that came out in 2002, Community Programs that Promote Youth Development, that was the first time we got the National Research Council is to back up and ask both to define readiness. At that point, they decided, what does a ready young person look like? What does a successful young person look like? And what do they have to have in their environment to get them there? So their definition of readiness at that point, as they talked about developmental domains, was that young people, in order to be successful, you have to focus on physical development, you have to focus on their intellectual development, you have to focus on their psychological and emotional development, and on their social development. And then they had specific things underneath of those, which speak more now to the language that we're using, the more specific language about skills. So they wanted to make sure young people had risk management skills, they had good health habits, they had critical thinking skills, decision-making skills, problem-solving skills, that they had autonomy, they had self-regulation, so time management. When they dug into what does it really look like, the language that we've got floating around now, all these various definitions of grit and persistence and problem solving and critical thinking, the soft skills, and that list can go on, those really were identified and sort of clustered into those four domains. So we've always had this understanding, and of course parents always have this understanding. If you ask them, what does your young person need to have to be ready to get a job, to be ready to go off to camp, whatever, they're not just going to talk about academic achievement.
Right.
They're going to talk about those kind of skills.
Right. Waking up on time.
Wake up on time.
Right.
They're going to need to learn to, work in a team better. They're going to need to speak up more.
Right.
Those are the kind of life skills, practical skills, 21st century skills that we all know are important, and that when you interview employers, they basically say those are more important. I mean, yes, we want them to be able to read and write, but readiness for the workforce really is those kind of time management, teamwork, communication, critical thinking, flexibility, those kind of skills that they can't teach. They can teach the content of work, but they can't teach those skills.
Right.
So we've had that general sense that those skills are important. We like the word readiness. I mean, obviously the word readiness has been around a long time on the early childhood side. It's now been picked up to bring to the other side around college and career readiness. When you go back and look at the definition of the word readiness, why we like it is there's two definitions: the willingness to do something and being prepared to do something. And it actually is the combination of those two things that makes you ready. So if young people don't have the skills to be ready, but they're willing, again, if I just suddenly take the fence down and let them run into the game, but we haven't prepared them for the game, they've been watching that game for a while, they're psyched and ready and willing to run in, they're not going to do well. So we need both of those. And it actually turns out that when you go into psychology, there's a little model called the Code B model of your behavior, what you actually do, what we can see you do, is a combination of your capacity, your preparation, your motivation, your willingness, and the opportunity that was presented to you. If somebody didn't present you the opportunity, if they didn't take the fence down, you couldn't get in the game. But going into the game, your decision to actually move into the game and succeed is a combination of your willingness to do it and whether you actually have been prepared to have the skills that you need to be successful. So that's really readiness. The other reason I like the word readiness is it's the readiness to do something, right? As we're looking forward, we don't know what young people or what challenges or opportunities are going to face. We need them to be ready to face challenges and opportunities in life, in work, in post-secondary education, in their communities, in their relationships that we can't anticipate. And so readiness really is about having those skills. We talk about having sort of a backpack of skills that you carry around with you.
Great. So can you talk about what you call the learning pit and why CISI coordinators in particular play such an important role in helping young people feel like they belong in this world of college and career exploration and success?
So again, we didn't make this up, but this idea of a learning pit, again, another psychological concept. It's amazing if you just, you Google it and go under images, you'll find that there are dozens and dozens of sort of drawings of what this looks like. So we just picked one that was our favorite. But the idea is that learning is hard. Learning anything is hard. Right? That 10,000 hours idea of it, to get to mastery, you really have to put effort in. If you've learned something very quickly, it probably wasn't either very hard or very significant. So the idea that we have to have young people understand that learning is a journey and that it really does have an up and down to it is important. So it's not just important for us to understand how to explain that to young people, it's important for us as practitioners to be able to see where they are in that learning pit. So if I walk into an environment and you say, today we're going to all learn to play the recorder, and I don't even know what a recorder is. My first instinct may be, well, I don't know what that is. I don't understand. Am I going to be good at that? You give it to me, I don't do well. I go, well, this isn't really for me, etc. At some point, I may hit a wall. You get me practicing, and I'm just not getting the sound out of this thing, or I'm not being able to do it. I hit a wall and say, I'm going to give up. What gets you over that wall? It's a combination of your past experience and the adults who are with you, and the peers who are with you. If they were, no, you can do it. Come on, let's try again. Why don't you turn it this way? Why don't you join our group? You're just getting the low notes out, so why don't you play the low notes? We'll play the high notes. Something has to happen to get you over that wall and up towards success. That's a very simple idea, but if you add on to that, as we're talking about young people who have had experiences in their lives that make them vulnerable and make them really cautious when they walk into a learning environment. If I'm coming into that environment and my past experiences are that I've come in, somebody's asked me to do something, I've tried, I've hit that wall, and either nobody noticed, nobody cared, or nobody was surprised. They almost kind of expected me to hit that wall, and they just let me sit there on that side of the wall. Why would I want to come into that environment and open myself up to a learning experience? So if you've got young people coming into your programs that you know or think have had those prior experiences, or they're exhibiting that kind of defensiveness to really leaning into the learning process, you've got to know how to deal with them. And that's just really important for us to understand. And so when we talk about those social and emotional domains of self-regulation and empathy and emotion management, the first thing that happens when young people come into a space is they have a fight or flight response. This is either going to look comfortable to me, I can tell I'm going to be socially accepted, and I can feel that this is going to be emotionally safe, either because I know these people, or I get that vibe from just coming in, or I've talked to my peers and they say this is an okay place to be. But if I don't have that, if I don't feel like I'm going to be accepted, I don't feel emotionally safe, I'm either going to leave, get defensive, or shut down. And practitioners have to know how to recognize that and how to work with that and stop and take the time to work with young people as individually or in a group in that kind of a situation in order for them to go to the next place of participating. Right? And then once they've participated for a while and they can see that this is going to work, they're going to get up to that sort of even higher order thinking skills. So they're going to lead. They're going to start to solve problems. They're going to take initiative. But it's a process. So all of those skills that we want young people to have actually stack. And you can't get young people right up here to problem-solving leadership if they're down here in this emotionally unsafe space. So the skills are important, but they really are a package. And skilled practitioners know how to not only recognize them, but how to actually sequence. There's a social emotional curriculum that you're weaving in to whatever the content curriculum is that you're offering. And that's the sign of an expert practitioner, that they know how to weave these together. It's not, let's all stop and talk about our feelings for half an hour. It's weaving these things in.
Right. And I think sometimes the youth that CIS works with in particular sometimes has that fight or flight response when they think about their futures and the idea of going off to post-secondary or into the workforce. It can be really intimidating, and it's important they have someone to help them through that learning pit. So we have about 500 people in the audience today, which is really exciting, including site coordinators and practitioners and program directors. So what would be your guidance and final words to them as they go out and do their work?
Well, first I want to thank them because we don't spend enough time acknowledging the importance of practitioners and acknowledging the importance of the folks that work directly with young people or are supervising those who do. And so here at the forum, and the Weichert Center for Youth Program Quality is a part of the forum, and it's the part that focuses on practitioners and focuses on what do we do to actually make sure that practitioners have the space and the time and the training and the support that they need to do all the things that we were just talking about. So first I want to thank them. Second, I want to say that improvement really is the name of the game. The first thing for all of us to recognize is that if we're going to change the odds for young people, we have to do two things. One, we have to make sure we're using every minute of our time as well as we can to get that integrated balance between delivering the content or delivering the service and making sure that we're creating the context in which those social emotional skills can be practiced and learned and demonstrated. The other thing is we have to have those skills. And so there was a study of teachers, for example, who were observed, and they found, not surprisingly, some teachers sort of lead with content. Mm-hmm. They're the folks that you're going to stand in front of the room and you're going to make sure you get that content. Some lead with relationships. Only 17% were good at both. And so knowing that, we all have to figure out how we get better at the piece that we're not as good at. So if you're a relationship person, you may want to work harder on how do I make sure that I'm not only creating that supportive environment, but that young person is moving forward in whatever the goal area is, whatever that goal area was that they're working on. But for those who are starting from a diverse space of working from their sort of intellectual or content strength, they may need to really step back and think about what they're doing and what they can do to improve practice. At the Weichert Center, we have taken a very low-stakes approach to practice improvement. And that basically is, we assume that practitioners want to do this, we assume that they understand it, we assume that they just need to get better at it, and that the easiest way to get better is in a low-stakes way. Get the language behind it, so you've seen some of that language, that we're looking at both the skills we want to build for young people and the specific practices that we can do. Simple things from welcoming all young people when they come into the room. Mm-hmm. So we have this sort of pyramid for youth program quality, which is very explicit. It talks about observable practices, and one thing you can do is download it and have a fellow practitioner just watch you for an hour. You can go all the way up to having, trained evaluators do it, but just getting comfortable and saying, if these are the important things to do to really make sure I'm making young people feel emotionally safe and socially accepted and ready to accept the challenges and the services that we're offering, am I doing it as well as I could? And use a simple observation tool. Once you've done that, there are methods you can download, there are short instructional courses you can take. This is not about a curriculum, and I think that's the main message that we're sending. On the school side, so often, social emotional learning gets a branded name. We're going to do ruler, we're going to do, second step, we're going to do whatever. And, I would say for the folks that are a part of the Communities and Schools family, you all understand the importance of doing this work. So look for ways to really improve your practice and talk to your peers and have those kind of learning communities in which you're sharing a common language and sharing a common goal and trusting each other to observe each other.
That's great. Well, and I think this afternoon really puts us in a good place to start that discussion. So thank you, Karen.
Well, you're welcome.
To the forum for being with us today and the great work that you all do. And we're going to show some information about how people can get connected with the Forum for Youth Investment and learn about some of the different resources that you all provide.
Great. So it was great having you. Thank you.